Hello, and welcome back to Argyle Digital CMO Virtual. My name is Dakota with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event. Sponsor booths are accessible from the sponsor tab located on the left side of your screen. To ask questions throughout the session, simply click into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, I am thrilled to introduce our moderator, Mina Heath, Chief Marketing Officer at Quizlet.
Okay, I think we're there. Welcome everyone, the little technical hitch that's allowed on these calls. Welcome to our session, Creating Relatable Content. My name is Mina Heath, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of a company called Quizlet. We're an alternative legal services provider, and we save companies millions and millions of pounds in legal fees. And we operate from India and the US. I'm actually in the UK. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you and moderate this session. I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists, or I'd like to let them introduce themselves actually. Martin, would you like to kick us off? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes, hi, Mina. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Georgia Aquarium, located in Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia Aquarium is the largest aquarium in the Western Hemisphere with 11.5 million gallons of water under one roof, and feature very premier animals like whale sharks, mantas, belugas, and a variety of predator sharks that we have in a new tank. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Carolina.
I can't match the coolness factor on that, Mina and Martin, but I'll give you an intro anyway. I am the Chief People and Brand Officer for Interim Healthcare. We are the first brand in home healthcare founded in 1966. I oversee the marketing and the HR function, a particularly interesting marriage as it relates to employer branding and trying to create a category of one for our brand in a very competitive market in healthcare. And I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. And Bryant.
Hey everybody, my name is Bryant Eisen. I am I work in the medical cannabis industry, or cannabis industry. Was the former chief marketing officer for a big multi-state operator named Columbia Care. And I currently now have my own independent consulting business, and I do a lot of work with cannabis and cannabis startups, like looking to build and scale their businesses.
Fantastic, thank you. So here we are, a year into this pandemic. We've all had some different experiences, I think, as we're in different locations around the world. One of the things we've had to look at is how we have changed our content to market to our customers, given that they're more vulnerable, situation is different, people have fewer choices. And I wondered if you could share some of the things that you've done, some of the opportunities you've taken in order to transform your business to adapt to the current difficult climate. Brian, shall we kick off with you?
Sure. I mean, I think that the interesting thing about the lockdown and COVID is that, cannabis was considered an essential service. And so we've been open. And from both the dispensary, the in-person dispensaries pick up, as well. But one of the things that we've seen is once again, the advancement of e-commerce, like even in the cannabis space. I mean, it used to be kind of just even a year or so ago, kind of to think about e-commerce was a little bit taboo, especially given that you can't ship the products across state lines, you can't put it in the mail. But what we found that there have been a number of kind of technological, kind of hacks around that, where essentially you have e-commerce kind of payment providers linking up with, delivery organizations. So essentially it's seamless to the consumer, but it looks like e-commerce, but essentially instead of going through kind of UPS or FedEx, that you get it through a delivery person. And we've seen an advancement in the e-commerce side of things, 5 years into the future. So we've seen a lot of acceleration in it. And I think that not only from a business standpoint, but from a communication standpoint, that's good news, because before you would have to communicate and kind of talk to kind of prospective customers and first convince them to be okay to walk into a cannabis dispensary and then kind of choose your product. Whereas now it's a lot more sophisticated targeting when you're kind of just looking at an e-commerce platform.
Thank you. And with lockdown, I mean, obviously some of your customers are medically vulnerable anyway. Have you seen an increase in that situation, you know, more problems, more issues for customers, for clients who are unwell?
I think originally you saw like a really big stock up. So about like March, April last year, there was a huge spike, and then it leveled off in the summer, but it's continued to build even further. I think that you have a lot of the medical conditions that people use cannabis for, like anxiety, sleep, are very prescient for our current time, and so you're finding that people are using it more for those things. I think there's a big question mark kind of within the industry right now about what happens once lockdowns lift. And it's not just for cannabis. I think it's also for like alcohol, which is, you know, when people are able to kind of get out, like, are we going to see, you know, like, have we kind of used products in a different way so that, like, you know, folks that previously didn't have it as part of their life, now they do, and there's a big behavior change in terms of when you go to friends in the park, like, now would you be comfortable using cannabis where previously you wouldn't, because it's just become a part of your life every day.
Thank you. Carolina, you're at the forefront of a lot of this. Tell us what you've seen over the last year.
Well, as you asked the question, Mina, vulnerability and giving people a sense of safety and security, the home health care site of care is probably, you know, the most obvious solution in the set of alternatives. But for us, in this environment, you know, we were listening closely. Obviously, we saw a drop off in procedures that were elective surgeries, the knee replacement, anything that was non-critical or non-emergency related. And so that has deferred a lot of sort of healthy maintenance among the patient base. We are seeing that come back, and that is a great thing, certainly for people who had to hold off on those procedures that really prevented their quality of life. So that's something we're tuned into. But in the height of the sort of April to September timeframe in 2020, we saw adult children very concerned about getting access to their loved ones, their parents, their extended family. And we created some real-time product solutions and messaging. In fact, we came out with a social isolation product that we call double checkers, because no one wants to be referred to as having a problem with social isolation. There's shame and fear affiliated with that. But instead, we sort of pivoted with a more positive and solution-oriented messaging. And we definitely found that we were hitting a nerve, and that we were able to offer that support. Ironically enough, we thought TV was going to be our best means for that. But as we all have now benefited from that rearview mirror, I think by midsummer, people were fatigued with television, the news cycle, everything that was going on in the United States and abroad. So instead, we sort of course corrected and moved into digital, where we found people searching for that kind of help. And we were really pleased to see that that product sort of met them at their point of vulnerability. But there's so much to learn and to understand for us in the home healthcare business. We think this was our year. It was the year to show the rest of the healthcare ecosystem that we could provide a solution for the surge as people were coming into the emergency departments and emergency rooms across the country. How could we make sure that they were only coming in with the most acute of symptoms and then sending them home right away? So we felt it was a year that probably has taken generations to sort of allow us to accept the spotlight. But we're quite proud, not only as a company, but as an industry. And so we're hoping this will be a turning point for us, sort of a tipping point, as we try to gain a little more credibility in this space, because we're often sort of viewed as the corner of healthcare that's more companion. But the reality is we can bring hospital level care home. So we're looking at it as a positive. But yeah, there was plenty to sort of listen in on, to stay tuned into that sense of vulnerability that our patients and clients were exhibiting.
Thank you. And Martin, you're in the leisure sector, which has been hard hit with the pandemic globally. How have you managed to deal with your potential customers and their vulnerabilities in this time?
Great question. It's the one question we've been working to answer the entire year, 2020 and even into 2021. We were closed. We closed when the government asked us to close March 15th of 2020. And we stayed closed for 3 months during that period of time, because we're all digital here. We use extensive social media, and we use over-the-top TV, streaming television. But we had come off a year, 2019, where we had very interesting earned media, social media results, and television accolades that we earned. And so that carried us a little bit into 2020. During the shutdown, what we found was we had millions of people visiting our webcams. So we upgraded the webcams to completely digital HD webcams. And on any given day, we'd have anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million people visiting our webcams, individuals. So that carried us along with our social media, and the resultant TV shows that were on Animal Planet. Season 1 and 2 was being replayed by Animal Planet, which featured Georgia Aquarium. And so we got a lot of media, and we got a lot of exposure during that period of time. So during the closure, we experienced tremendous brand value build, but then we had to reopen in June. So we ran a campaign called Stay Safe. Mm-hmm. And what we did is we emphasized on our website, in our communications, and our email blasts, and everything else we did, that the aquarium was a safe place to be. Masks required, temperatures taken, social distancing, hand sanitizing stations, and we enforced the rules pretty strictly. And that seemed to really build confidence and trust from our attendee, where the attendance began to build in July and August and September. And we finally had a profitable quarter in the fourth quarter, and the first quarter of 2021 will be profitable again. Again, heavy reliance on social media, heavy reliance on our website, heavy reliance on over-the-top television. And we've been pretty good at taking advantage of all three mediums, as well as our earned media, which we get a lot of. So we're transparent. We show everything about the animals. What people want to know is, how well do you take care of the animals? And who is it that's taking care of the animals? And it's around that kind of messaging that we found a real great reception from our audience. We're running now about 60% of normal. Normal would be 2019, which was our record year. And we're profitable, which is a blessing at this particular moment.
Thank you. One of the things I want to look at is how you have helped your team to come together in these times again, to create the sort of that you are looking for when communicating with your audience. And also, in terms of your own perception, do you feel you've changed your way of marketing, your views on marketing and communicating with your client base? Come to you again, Bryant, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ways of working have been, it's funny. I think that there was kind of an initial kind of piece of it, which I think people were really excited about, and excited kind of obviously being couched, appropriately, but like, I think that when you're used to commuting, a half an hour to an hour every day, and you don't see your kids, you don't have dinner with them. Like, obviously, like the décollage of time, like, was really nice. The fact that, like, you could do your work kind of when you needed to, and I think that was, everybody really enjoyed it, and I think that a lot of the team was excited, and I think people worked probably as much, if not more, but I think that you kind of felt like the ability to kind of choose your time was great. The interesting thing now is, I think a lot of times, I think it's just video fatigue right now. I think you have a lot of people who are, as we've started to kind of get into this, a lot of these conversations are in-person conversations, and we're social animals. And so kind of doing everything over email or, whatnot wasn't sufficient. So I think that a lot of the team finds that they're on video calls like all day long, from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. So much so that one of the CEOs I'm working with right now, essentially got, and I have some too, like, your blue light like readers that you have to wear, because otherwise it's very taxing, I think, physically. And I think that not that the novelty ever was has worn off. I think everyone is grateful not having to commute as much as they did, but I think that people are ready to transition back to more in person, because I think that it finds it's a little bit more dynamic, and frankly, it's more kind of personally gratifying. And so I think as you're kind of communicating with consumers, I think those messages kind of hold true, which is, just hang in there. We're, like, the things are changing, and I think that there's that sense of optimism that things are changing, but a recognition that, like, we're all a little bit fatigued.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's funny because I don't want to have a contrarian viewpoint to you, Brian. I've had the pleasure of being on panels with you before, but I would say there's a funny cycle we're entering. And it's not mine personal, but it's sort of what I'm observing. But could it be that we've got a little Stockholm syndrome in all of us right now? We've gotten so used to our captive COVID. It's almost like we can't give ourselves permission to think, when will this open up? What will I do and what will I sound like, right? But exactly, I think, Bryant, to your point, of course, it's beautifully made, the fatigue, the resentment, the lack of creativity that comes over a good cup of espresso, or, a happy hour where your best ideas are an exchange of, oh, I just sat in on this, service call, and this is what I heard. What do you guys think? We just don't have that, right? We can still listen into the service calls, but that integration and live swapping of ideas. But for me personally and our team, one of the things we did, and this is why I was referring not being contrarian, but we added more time to some of our Zooms because we needed a moment to just storm and just be there for each other. Whatever it might have been, reviewing the Super Bowl ads or talking about current events, just to sort of, even if it felt forced, but I felt like all we were doing was work, work, work. And so that moment to just sort of observe what's going on topically, how are people feeling, finding about each other's, I think just lent more empathy so that we could be sensitive to, oh, why didn't they answer right away? Well, because their child's having a meltdown, and we have to lead with grace and generosity of spirit for each other. But the one thing I try to do was bring in more resources, even offloading some of the tedium and some of the rote tasks and sending them outside so that it could free us up to be creative for the big lifts. That seemed to help. But I'll say, I think we lost someone in the midst of all this. I think the drain, and I had to monitor it. I don't want that burnout to happen, but it's a great question, Mina. And for me personally, I think what I've changed is, trying to find ways to promote that grit and that resilience. And there's a lot of self-talking. There's a lot of, fighting the urge of sort of, having a fixed mindset, but instead really thinking, okay, what's the big picture here? Like, let's stay anchored. So I'm sure there's themes everyone's got, but that's at least what happened from our corner of the world.
Thank you. And Martin, what's the impact been on you?
Well, there's always something dynamic happening at the aquarium on a daily basis, births, deaths, you name it. That's the nature of dealing with animals large and small. And through God's grace, we've been very successful. We had a very successful beluga whale birth in 2020, which is unusual. Beluga whales, even in the wild, normally don't have successful births, only about 25% of the time. We've got another pregnant beluga. So we focus on the positive as much as possible. We've also been able to drive very creative thinking. We're about to sign a major contract with a streaming, well, probably the world's largest streaming operation to feature our content, which we're going to produce. We've also really struck out with Amazon. When I say struck out, I don't mean strike out. We've really launched a partnership with Amazon using their ad platform and their data, which has been very creative and has really helped us expand our audience reach, as well as bring in new audience members. So it's been very dynamic, and we take advantage of that in order to drive creative thinking. I give a lot of responsibility to department heads and really let them do their thing. And really, I'm the blocking back for most of it. When they require resources, that's what my job is, to get them the resources to accomplish what they need to do. So that and a whole bunch of other different new technical innovations that we brought to the table have really comprised the balance of 2020 and the early part of 2021. So it's been a very dynamic time, but we're coming back. A lot of aquariums are still closed, and some of them suffering badly. Some will never open again, which creates a whole new problem, a massive problem. What do you do with the animals? You can't euthanize them. So what do you do with them? And this is a problem that zoos and aquariums are going to be dealing with for the next 2 to 5 years.
And what are they doing with them, Martin?
Well, that's a good question. We're trying to establish the ground rules for how do you deal with that.
So have you taken some from other zoos?
Yes, we have.
Yeah. Or other aquaria, rather. Yeah.
Both zoos and aquariums.
Yeah.
We do a lot of rescue work. Most of our sea lion population are rescued, sea otter population rescued. Penguins, we hatch our own, but we're involved in a reclamation project with South Africa for the South African penguins. And we birth them, and we provide a lot of monetary and physical support to the South Africans in that regard. So we're doing a lot of that. The same with belugas and a number of other of our animals. We do an enormous amount of research at Georgia Aquarium, most of it published, peer-reviewed, and we do a huge dolphin project every year assessing the health of dolphins in the Indian River Lagoon in Florida. That's an interesting project because what we found is many of the illnesses that dolphins suffer from in the Indian River Lagoon, primarily cancer, are also being suffered by the population, human population that live along the Indian River Lagoon. Fascinating project. So that's what we do, and it's dynamic, it's exciting, it's very rewarding, and it's been successful so far.
Thank you. So the theme of the new content is authenticity, and I've always tried to encourage people I work with and coach to be authentic, not to have that work persona and the home persona. And that's been my really my goal, my life purpose for the last 25 years. And all of a sudden, this year or last year, everyone has been forced to be authentic and not to have these two different personas. As you said, Bryant, spending more time with their families, which has been fantastic for so many people. I used to get on a plane every week, and I worked globally. I didn't do that when my children were little because I wanted to be around with them. I only started when they grew up. But actually, you see people who are traveling all the time who never really see their children, and a year will go really fast. And taking away that commuting time, whether it's international commuting or local commuting, gives you back that sense of family, and also the sense of community that you've created for your own teams, and you've had to keep them all on side. You mentioned a couple of struggles that you encountered, Carolina. Going forward, what do you think you will have learned about bringing authenticity to the workplace, whether we go back to work as a mixed type of home working and in-person working? What do you think you'll take forward?
You said that so beautifully. I don't know what I could add. I think the global experience is quite interesting. I think that this collision of trying to lead with as open mind as possible, knowing where your colleague is coming from. And that could happen culturally, time zone wise, experience, generational, but, also connecting on things that matter, right? And for us, it was our stakeholders, those patients we were serving, the employees that were serving those patients. And that to me is a beautiful thing to unite around. And that clarity, that bell ringing clarity automatically gave us authenticity. And honestly, we needed moments to let people fall apart. I mentioned the positive of adding time to Zoom so we could hear things, but we learned that people's loved ones were getting sick either due to COVID or just general life occurrence, right? But this ability to let people be vulnerable, not to borrow too much from Patrick Lencioni, who's just brilliant, but it starts with trust, right? At the base of that fulcrum. And that's a weird place to sort of come from if you're building trust by Zoom only. But, whatever those connectivity points, that allows that currency of vulnerability and exposing yourself, your background and sharing your fears. But, then there's also time to sort of move to accountability, because I think that's the other struggle, not to sound impatient, but we do have deadlines, we do have goals, and how do we stay focused, and how do we give each other that pathway? For me, it was communication, and asking the questions, what else do you need? What can we do to clear the path? How can we give you the backup resources? And when people knew that was always going to be a way, that, it wasn't impossible, that we just had to reprioritize, I think people were actually ending up being more open. You didn't find out that you were in a emergency situation an hour before a deadline. You were sort of staying on pace, and people felt that ability to fill you in on, what were the risks on a project, or what could be, a missed deadline. But it is tough, though. The home and the work line blurring. For me, especially in our craft, right? We're all in marketing. You have to shut it down. You have to turn it off. You have to give your brain that space to empty, so that you can stay connected, and then find that creativity and be an observer and listen with a third ear. You can't do that 24/7. It's impossible. And so, but I commend you, Mina, because if you, as my team leader or as my CEO, were that kind of energy, it's really quite enlightened. The truth is, in healthcare, it's tough. There's not a lot of room for coddling. And I'm not calling what you described coddling, but these are people on the front line. There's not, you can't just say, I'm going to take a half PTO when you're the only one on that shift, right? So it's just balance and resources to cope. I think that's kind of where we landed.
I could just add something. Like it was interesting kind of hearing you talk, Carolina, because I think that, thinking through kind of like the what's changed, from a workflow, the one thing I've kind of seen a lot of is people's the dog and pony stuff has kind of gone out the window a bit. You know what I mean? Like, I remember, having, when you have these big kind of presentations where, I don't need to kind of describe, well, it's, those big boardroom tables, and you have like the decision maker there, and you have like the decision maker's brother, who's also kind of a, stakeholder. And so there's a lot of kind of like pressure leading up to these like big presentations and decision points. And I feel that, although their presentations are still kind of a way, a good way of communicating, I feel that the air is a little bit out of the balloon from the standpoint of it's not as much of a, I spent 4 weeks like working on this like presentation for like a 30-minute spot on a board at the board meeting, Martin. You know what I mean? There's still a little bit of that, but it doesn't have the same kind of feel. And I think it's a little bit more like at least snackable decisions is what I would call it. And where you go in and you'd kind of have a 30 minute like Zoom with the decision maker, say like, can I just like run you through this? I haven't, I don't feel like I need to kind of get the entire teams, like in the same room and have like the finance person and have the operations person and having everybody kind of have all the information there. There's a little bit more of a feeling that you can do that more informally. I wonder if it's going to, if that's the durable piece. I would love it if it were, because I think that sometimes like that piece makes it, adds on weeks and days to your projects. But I think that that's one. And then the other point I was going to make in terms of authenticity is, look, I mean, when you're kind of like building cannabis products a lot of them are lifestyle products. So they're medical, but then they also kind of like link into someone's, like authentic lifestyle. And so what I've kind of found is for me, as well as like other people I work with, is, because you have a little bit more time to do other things, that you're connected more to folks in whatever lifestyle you're pursuing, right? So like whether it's, you're on kind of conferences like this, whether you're kind of like on social media more, whether you're kind of, as opposed to reading, I would read reports about kind of what people were doing. And I feel that kind of I'm just much more in the lifestyle now because you can kind of flip in and out of that. If you have an extra 5 minutes while you're making soup for lunch, you pull up you pull up the Instagram for your top 5 brands, and you just kind of see what they're talking about. And so I feel a lot more connected to the lifestyle now, and I feel like that we're just a lot more like impactful when we actually do put programs together.
Very good, thank you. And Martin?
Well, I've tried to keep everybody focused on new creative projects, which really seems to have worked really well. And I'm very fortunate. I'm working with the same team of department heads and subheads that I've been working with for the last 5 or 6 years. So, we know each other, and the good, bad, the ugly. And there's a lot of trust and joviality. Humor helps a great deal. And we've managed to get a lot done. We've launched a virtual education platform for K-12 with a curriculum that we've created, live sessions as well as pre-recorded sessions. That's going very well. We've created virtual tours for people who cannot or will not come to the aquarium. That is going very well. And multiple other projects that we focused on in 2020 and early 2021 that have really sapped everybody's creative juices and helped us stay together as an organization, as a marketing and sales team. So it's been very tough for the salespeople because they work on basically a low salary and commission, and they've all been doing very well up until last year. Thank God they're now starting to do a lot better, and they've stuck with it, which I'm very grateful for. And trying to keep these people motivated and, aligned with our objectives and staying with the aquarium, it's been a big part of the challenge. But the marketing team, very creative, very solid, and kept them focused on projects that really, really they liked. And that's been the key.
I think you've all mentioned it, and business relationships, where you've actually spent time with those people and you have existing relationships. I think sure. Connectivity has meant that we can keep things going. We can, we have that understanding of the other people. But what about new business and new clients and new relationships? Isn't that so much harder virtually? Carolina.
Well, it's interesting. We support our franchise owners from our National Support Center, and certainly telehealth helped with the patient and the client interaction. But exactly to your point, business development with referral sources whose facilities were on lockdown. How do you break through that clutter when everyone's probably trying to get Zoom time and everyone's trying to send some sort of mailer or package, but the fact is people aren't at work. So how do you find them? In our world, they're more likely because they're essential and that work happens in that physical space, but still. So I think what we have found is showing up through the language of appreciation and recognition. Obviously, it has to start with authenticity, which is certainly your theme, Mina. But you know, a little bit of gratitude and heartfelt appreciation goes a long way. Just this week, for example, the month of March is Social Workers Month, and tomorrow it culminates with Social Work Day. This is a section of our referral source segment that have basically, you know, been unsung heroes, because yes, the nurse and the doctors and all the hospital staff are incredibly important, but the social worker who's sort of the six-handed goddess or god sort of moving things through on behalf of their stakeholders, they really have been an incredible part of how this health system, especially the United States, has stayed up. So little things, you know, having fun, creating joy, breaking through that clutter, that sort of establishes who we are. And then we've earned the right to ask for some FaceTime via Zoom and to introduce our latest clinical program. But, you know, and being mindful that they are struggling, right? And that they are bombarded with work. But those surprise and delight exchanges have been really helpful for us, and doing so in a manner that's very on their terms, right? We don't want to ever be invasive. We want to earn the ability to send something or offer them a break, all, by the way, within you know, the legalities of healthcare, because as you can imagine, there's proprieties around that. But that's been something that we've been working on, but also hosting webinars. I mean, these old school things are all new again, right? And inviting people to learn. We've been using education as a form too to get people connected back to us. I think people are hungry to shore up their knowledge and their skill sets. So we use continuing education units as a form of sort of keeping that communication flowing. But, you know, the business relationship piece without the ability to do face-to-face certainly has been a struggle.
Thank you. Martin, you mentioned the education platform that you've set up and the new things that you're doing, but what about the referral sources? You know, it's going to conferences, it's meeting with your peers, it's that exchange that we've all missed, maybe some more than others. I used to go to, you know, 50 conferences a year. So for me, it's a big part of what I used to do, and there's been nothing for 12 months. What about you, Martin?
Well, everything has been turned over to virtual. So we attend a lot of virtual meetings, conferences. In fact, one's coming up next week for me, the American Zoological Association. But that's what we've been doing, and it's worked pretty well. I think we've really learned how to work virtually, which has been very, very helpful. And it seems to be channeling a lot of energy, and seems to be working very well for us, both whether we attend a conference that's educational, or we put on a seminar that's educational, or we just collaborate internally on projects or with vendors that we're working with. All of this is being done virtually, and so far it's worked. So, you know, you have to learn new skill sets. Virtual was a whole new idea a year ago. It suddenly became dominant in the way people live and work. So we adjusted. As they say, when life throws you a curveball, hit curveballs. Learn how to hit curveballs. We did. We learned that. And, you know, we're a 24/7 operation. It doesn't stop. The animals need to be taken care of. Staff is here. Even during the lockdown, you know, we had 400 people on staff, feeding the animals, caring for the animals, providing medical care. So there's something going on all the time here, whether it's virtual or in reality. And that's the challenge, but it seems to have worked. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful to the people that work for me, for their creativity and problem solving skills. And we've adjusted, and we're driving new attendance. To me, it's very exciting. Honestly, I'm absolutely astonished that anybody shows up at all, but they do, and they do in significant numbers, which is really a credit to the people that are working for me and their creativity and what we've been able to do to reach out.
Thank you. Bryant, any real life stories that have been intertwined with what's going on in terms of marketing? Anything that you can think of? Or Carolina, did you want to give us an example while Bryant's thinking?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say, like, I would probably defer to Carolina because I
Yeah.
think that healthcare examples are probably much more kind of relevant. I think that beyond things like getting people back together, the social elements, like I think that those, I think that just kind of gets back to kind of some of the themes we were talking about earlier around people get frustrated. They want to get back together. They want to find they're kind of sick of talking about it. They want to get back to normal life. And so that has kind of worked its way in, but I can imagine in the healthcare space, it's just a different situation altogether.
Thank you. Well, we'll finish with that story, Carolina. Tell us.
Well, I'll try to be as brief as possible, but for us, as I mentioned at the top of the remarks, recruiting is a big part of our ability to really grow. So we do not have a demand problem in the healthcare space, especially home healthcare, with 10,000 people aging into Medicare every day. What we do have is a staffing or the labor side of the equation. And so what we saw this year that really came to us from real stories coming from our own field clinicians was this sentiment of being made for this, that almost their life calling, their career training, all of their experience, their clinical licensing was sort of culminating in a moment like this year. And, as we look back and think, how will the McKinseys of the world predict the next 100-year catastrophe? Who would have said 2 years ago on anyone's threat box was, 100-year flu, or the equivalent of what they used to call the flu, right? We had cybersecurity, we had threats, we have terrorism, but now we can add this new place. But for us, what we heard from the voices of our own nurses out in the field was that they were made for this. That inspired us to roll out with our new recruiting campaign that we launched December 1st, and it has been amazing. It's an invitation for various sectors of the employee economy, the applicant economy, those who are already in healthcare, who are feeling burnt out and want the solace of being one-on-one care with the confined in home healthcare. Young folks who feel a sense of calling because they're also not going to college right now. They've decided that foregoing it for a year or two might be the best bet. So we've invited them. We call them our difference makers. But the employees that saw the opportunity to shift lanes, and that was the idea. And so it's been a wonderful campaign, but it came, Bryant, right from the voices of our employees in a Zoom, as a matter of fact, that I was sitting in on, and thank God we recorded. I said, did you hear what Brittany said? She, and of course it's not like a earth shattering from a marketing standpoint, but her feeling, her observation that of course she was going to go into a COVID case. She wasn't going to say no. She felt, prepared, and she had the PPE, and all of that laddered up to how we hopefully differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. But it was an exciting one. It's one of those rare things as marketers, all of us, we sort of live for, and I'm just grateful for that good luck.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, I think it's been a challenge for all of us, looking at how we work and working differently and looking after our teams. And I think we still have a little way to go. And then there's going to be the adjustment to whatever we end up with when things start to open up. As I mentioned, in the UK, we're in lockdown pretty much until June. And then we'll see if people can still remember how to walk to the shops and, that kind of thing. Hospitality is starting to come back, I think, in May, and we'll see. A lot of hospitality workers have moved over to healthcare. We've seen people changing professions because they've got to find work to do. But I think that spirit of creativity, that strength that we've all found within ourselves to keep going and to think differently, be a little kinder, be a little more gentle in our leadership styles, some of us, and see things from the perspective of our employees. And our team members in a different way, I think. Thank you all for your contributions. Really lovely to see you all. I'm going to hand back over to Dakota.
Yes, I just want to reiterate, thank you so much all for a wonderful panel discussion. That was really insightful and thoughtful. I want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this fantastic session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 2:55 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be a fireside chat titled Virtual Value, How to Engage Your Audience While Remote. You will automatically be redirected to the next session, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again, everyone.